I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Um, when Larry approached me a couple months ago, he asked me to teach a seminar. He said, "Well, I'd like you to do one on fixed blades." And I said, "Well, that's kind of a general,
Broad.
fairly broad. We've been doing fixed blades since 1902. So I says, what other kind of direction can you give me?" And he says, "Well, just pick an interesting topic you think that people enjoy, and go from there." So I thought, well, I run customer service in the warranty department, so I handle a lot of phone calls and a million emails. And one of the questions, most often asked question is, how old is my buck knife? So I thought, well, that'd probably be an interesting topic, because there's a lot of the knives they're difficult to date. So how old is this knife? How do you tell? I thought what I'd do is kind of take you through like a typical phone call. You do have to have a sense of humor in this position, because you deal with a lot of people that they have knives, and the knives are near and dear to them, but they're maybe not knife collectors, or definitely not knife people. Whenever I train new customer service reps, I always tell them, listen, that's the best thing you can do, is listen and never assume. If they use a common knife term, don't assume that they really know what that term means. So just ask lots of questions and listen to what they say, and eventually you'll paint them into a corner, and you'll be able to know what that knife is that they're holding. Because it's especially hard when it's over the phone and you don't have a picture, so you don't have any idea. So I'll probably get about 2 of these types of phone calls a month, and it's kind of funny. I mean, they're generally these are the types of calls I get from non-knife people, and I chuckle as I go through the call, because I know what's going to happen, and I know how the story ends, but it's always fun. I'll get a call, and they'll say, "I've got a buck knife. I'd like to know how old it is." And I'll go, "Well, great. I'll be glad to help you. Can you tell me everything that's stamped on the blade? I need to know everything." "Oh, it's a buck. It's stamped buck." I'm thinking, wow. Well, we know that in 1945 to 1967, that's how the knives were stamped. They were stamped just buck. So with that in my head, I tell them, "Wow, you've got an old knife. That's nice. You don't see a whole lot of those these days. It's sometime between 45 and 67." And they'll go, "Well, I don't think it's that old. I don't think there's any way it's that old. I don't think that's correct." And I'll go, "Well, is there anything else on the stamp? Can you take another look at it?" "Well, I don't have it with me right now. It's in the other room." "That's okay. I'll hold." So they go, and you'll hear crashing and banging and shuffling around, and they'll come back. "Okay, I've got the knife." "Okay, great. Now I need to know everything that's on that blade stamp, because it's going to tell me how old your knife is. Is there anything other than buck?" "Oh, well, it does say USA." "Oh, okay. So there's a little more to it." So we know that in 1967, Buck wanted to start selling knives to Canada, so they added USA to the stamp. And in 72 we added the model number, so they're describing a knife that says Buck USA. I'm thinking, okay, great, we've got a knife that's from 67 to 72. And I'll explain that to them and say that's still an old knife. It sounds like a real special knife. And I go, "Well, that doesn't sound right. I don't think the knife is quite that old. There's something that's not right. Are you sure that's the right date?" Well, I'll ask them one more time. "Are you sure? Is there anything else on that blade stamp? Can you check that blade again and see if there's anything else that you can see?" "Well,
119.
It says 119 on there too." Okay, we're getting somewhere now.
Does this sound familiar?
It does to me.
Too funny.
So So now I'm thinking, and it's funny because usually how I get this is I'll be back at this stage and I'll go, well, I'm pretty sure it's a 119. And I'll go,
How do you know that?
how do you know that? Well, it says so on the blade. Okay. So now I'm thinking here, and I'll be going, wow, it's from 72 to 86. That's when we use that blade stamping, and that's a good knife. And I'll go, that 70, that just doesn't sound right because, I don't quite think it's that old. I still don't think it's quite that old. So I figure I'll go one more time to the well and ask them, is there anything else? Sometimes there's a little mark after the model number on the blade. Do you see anything on there? And I go, well, come to think of it, there's a V. And they go, great. So now we know, 86 was like that, 87, 88, 89. So I'll go, well, you know what? I think we figured it out. That V is a date code for 1989. That's when that knife was made. We've got it nailed down. That's pretty good. I hope that helped. Well, that can't be right. Well, why not? Well, we got that knife for my son when he graduated. I don't remember what year it was exactly, but I know it wasn't 89. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't 89. So I'll think about it and I'll go, well, is there anything funny about that V? Is there anything not right about that V? Well, it's laying over. Oh, okay. Well, is it pointing at the 119 or away from the 119? Oh, it's pointing at it. Oh, well then there we go. We know that it's 1986. So, well, yeah, that's right. That's when he graduated. I remember because we had cousin Phil and blah blah blah. But that's I probably get one of these calls every couple of weeks. A couple of them a month, and they're like I said, they're fun. They're humorous. I enjoy them because you're playing detective, trying to figure out when this crazy knife was made. Now, to like a person like that, they got the knife, they inherited it from a father. They have a special connection to that knife, and it's special to them. And these fairly large blocks of time, that's good enough for them. But you get collectors, and you tell them, okay, it's from 67 to 72. That's like what, 5 years? That's an awful large block of time. And like with me, it's like, no, I want to know. I want one from 67, 8, 9, 10, 71, 72. So within knives that are stamped Buck USA, how do you slice and dice it? How do you nail it down tighter? Well, we'll start with the knives that are stamped just Buck. Right off the bat, if you're looking for a way to tighten that up a little bit, we know that in 1961, that's when Buck incorporated. And knives from the time that we incorporated will have the familiar black phenolic handle. So if the knife doesn't have that black phenolic handle, there's a good chance that we're now in this time frame. And there's even ways to narrow down these knives, although those are the knives that we have the least amount of information on. The only information that we have on the knives we got from the knives that we were able to see, maybe a few old catalogs from those time frames, the 40s and 50s. We've got just a handful of them. And catalogs are an okay source of information, but the pictures of knives that are often used year after year, even though the knife has changed. So you have to use that information with a grain of salt. I've been able to accumulate about 100 old magazines, Outdoor Life, Field and Stream, Sports at Field, from the 40s, 50s, and 60s that have actual Buck ads in them. And it took about a couple of years of cruising around eBay to find all of these, and I had to buy an awful lot of magazines, flip through an awful lot of old ads that were pretty amusing from the 40s to find these little ads from Buck knives. And that's really how they got started back then, was through the mail order business. in the 40s and 50s. That's what it was. So we know that within this group of these knives, which we call them the handmade knives, there's a way to even to differentiate which ones of these are older than the others. I'll talk briefly about the ones that are from pre-45, because people always say, well, what about the ones before 1945? I thought you started in 1902. Well, we have from 1902 to 1945 two knives that are from that time frame. That's all we've ever seen. And one of them, we're not positive is from that time frame. We're fairly certain. But both of those knives aren't stamped anything. They're one of them is a stiletto that Chuck wrote about in a recent newsletter article. And the stiletto has the clear lucite, and I believe it has aluminum and masonite spacers, just like this camper. Did Chuck show you that knife?
Yeah,
He
showed it this morning.
In his
keeps it,
seminar.
oh, okay. He keeps it hidden from me. He told me he doesn't want me to get my hands on it. He knows me well. But the other knife that we have that's from before 1945 is a knife that, if the story is true, it was a wedding knife that Hoyt Buck made for Al and Ida when they got married. They got married, I believe it was in 1933. And again, the knife was clear lucite with masonite spacers, and it's not stamped Buck at all. You know, it's not a whole lot to go on, but as far as the knives from before that time, that's all we have to go on. Those two knives, you know, documentation. But it does have me thinking that there's a good chance that there's a lot of other Buck knives out there that aren't stamped Buck. So they might be, you know, you might see them at knife shows or on eBay, and they'll, you know, be being bought and sold, and no one knows what they really are. I do watch eBay for that sort of thing, and I've never seen one. But I assume they must be out there, because Hoyt made several thousand while he was in Mountain Home, Idaho, before he moved to San Diego in '45. And that is when he started stamping his knives.
The wedding knife would be a bigger knife than that camper that he just held up, much longer blade.
Yeah, you had one in your
Little thinner.
display.
You presume all the handles were lucite before 45?
No, we actually, you know, we see him with the clear lucite, which for the most part he got from aircraft, you know, salvaged aircraft. I'm not sure where he got the masonite from, but you know, if he was using masonite and lucite, there's a good chance some of those older knives would have been solid masonite. I have one here from probably 45 or 46 that is stamped, and it is solid masonite. So, you know, I think it's all assumptions, but they're very likely that the knives before 45 are also solid masonite, you know, or solid lucite, maybe even micarta. We've got some early knives that were, there's a little kitchen knife that's made out of a brown micarta. So, yeah, and it really is anyone's guess on those knives, because that is all we have. It's just two knives. There's no documentation or anything else before 45. But from 45 to about 51, around in that time frame, you'll see the knives. You can tell that they're older. Generally, you'll see them stamped Buck. It'll be on the right-hand side as you hold the knife like this. And the handle types will be like this is got a see-through. You can even see through the blue a little bit. But he used a lot of that kind of color. Real creative handle types. Here's a knife I call the Christmas knife because of the colors he chose, the red, green, and white. You'll get those off-the-wall colors, really unique knives. Here's one that he made with all orange. I call that my Jolly Rancher knife. It looks like a piece of candy. But he glued two slabs together and drilled a hole through them, made that knife. I've only seen 4 of these. And in this one I picked up a few years ago on eBay, it it is really a beat up and not particularly good looking knife, but from a historical standpoint, it was very important. I told my wife that I had to have the knife, you know, no matter what I had to give for it, and luckily, probably because of its condition, I got it for relatively cheap. I got it for less than $200. But it's got a big crack through the blade. I mean, the blade's just about ready to fall apart, and the handle's all age checked. But it's a solid block of lucite, and I haven't seen another one like that yet. So it's not the prettiest, but it's from a historical standpoint, it's pretty important. Well, after a little while, I think it was as the mail order business started to pick up, he started to get a little bit more standardized in his handle types. What you'll start to see is a solid handle of red, green, blue, or black with one white spacer through the middle of it. And you'll see, here's one on a Skinner, it's kind of interesting to note that it's a model 112 Skinner. You know, the 112 is the Ranger today. There's also a 110 Skinner.
So those sorts of handles you're saying are in what time frame?
They're going to be about 1951. I've got a handout on these.
So definitely after the war.
If you can hand those out. Yeah, and as far as you know, those types of conclusions, it is a lot of it's assumption.
Joe, do you have any relationships with Consolidated Vultee, who came Convair there in San Diego? Do you have relationships with those people? Because they had steels and different aircraft. They were building stuff and the bombers for the war.
I believe that was where he got his worn out files. There was some sort of relationship with them. I've heard him mention them a lot. I believe that's what he got from them. Was the files that they ended up using.
My dad ran the machine shop down there at Convair during the war.
Oh wow.
So I'm not around to ask, but
He
the
may use
information
the
we're
file.
getting today, I'm just thinking.
And some of it is old stuff. You can tell that they're definitely made from files. Faintly, you can see the file marks still on them.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, I remember my dad having knives, in his toolbox and stuff like that. And
Thank you.
yeah, looking like that, and as a kid, I didn't know really so much.
Well, it's possible he used a file that he ended up being a buck knife. That'd be kind of cool.
You know, they used to like to leave some file marks on just so the people who bought the knife would know that it was made out of good steel.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple that you can definitely tell that that was definitely a file.
Whenever I see one with a teeth mark on it, I razz Chuck about it, because that was his first job, was to grind the teeth off of the files. He said he said they're stacked up like cordwood, and he'd have to sit there and grind all the teeth off so that his dad or grandpa could make them into blades. But apparently he didn't like that job a whole lot. Well, during around the same time, about 51 ish, Buck started using lignum vita. It's I guess a tropical wood, and I heard it's used for bearing material in ships. It was a wood that needed to be stabilized, and Chuck tells stories of having to cook the wood because it would stink up the whole shop. They just have all this stuff cooking, and it was really messy because the sap would drip out. Lots of oil. And the problem was, apparently it didn't always work too well. Like, as this knife shows, it's got some cracks in that lignum vita, and that's what you see on a lot of these old knives with the lignum vita, is it's cracked or twisted or warped. So in about 55, 56 is when they said we need to switch to something different, and they chose two handle options. You could either get your knife in elk now or ebony, and that ebony is real dark. It doesn't always come that way, but they use those two handle materials from about 56 right up through into 61. Here's an example. Chuck told me that when you see one with a blonde band in it, it's because they got a little too close to the outer, closer to the bark on the wood, and I guess it had a tan band. So you'll see them sometimes where they're this color, solid that color, and it looks so much like the lignum vitae, it's hard to tell them apart. But that gets us up to 1961, and a lot of the information that we have on this is subject to change. If anything ever comes that hopefully someday that'll help nail things down, that'd be really good. I think we've got it pretty close. According to Chuck's memory, he says it looks pretty good to him, so I'm good with that. So now we're at 1961. We're still looking at knives just stamped, but how do you tell 61 to 67? How do you nail that down? Well, we know that in 63, in June of 63, that's the last of the barrel nuts. We've got enough of information to know. I mean, we've got it nailed down to the month that by 63 in June we were no longer making a barrel nut. So if the knife has that barrel nut, and the barrel nut would be a pea-sized circle on the back of the pommel. This isn't a barrel nut, but I've just painted that on to give an idea. You'll see that circle back there. It means it's a barrel nut, and it will be in a sheath like this. It doesn't say buck on it for the most part. Sometimes they do. Sometimes I'll have a plain stamp, plain snap. But one knife that collectors like to look for, I've seen a few of them, is one that's a transition between the barrel nut and what we call the flat tang. The flat tang is the one where it has the rivet through the side of the pommel. You'll see them with the barrel nut and the rivet through the side, and it's like a transition. When they were done, they decided to go to flat tang. They still had a bunch of pommels that were drilled for the barrel nut, so they just plugged that hole with a plug of aluminum, and went ahead and drilled the side. The early press that they used to press everything together, they glued it up and they put all the components on. They press it together. They drill a hole through the pommel, and that hole would go through a hole in the blade tang. And they press it down, and the machine that they used borrowed parts from I forget, Dean Hussey, one of our old engineers. He told me it was like a 40s Ford convertible that was parked out back. He went out there and stole the hydraulics out of the roof, and he used that to make the press to hold it down together so they could put that rivet through there. So, looking at barrel nut versus flat tang, that gets us, from 63 to 67. There's ways in between here to nail it down, and for the more hardcore collectors, you can always talk to me later and I can show you how to do that. But like from 67 to 72, I'll show a way that you can cut that in half at least.
Okay, thanks.
In 1969 we made a change that's really easy to see. Here's two knives. They're both stamped Buck USA, and this one uses bone hard fiber spacer material, and this one is red micarta. What happened in 1969 was they were looking for another way to save some of the operations on finishing the knife. When they put the whole thing in together and assemble it, there's sharp corners, there's parting lines on the aluminum and the handle. There's a lot of sanding and buffing operations, so they wanted to get rid of that without all the handwork of sanding and buffing. So they thought, why don't we use the vibratory finishing? If you're on a tour, you may have saw those big bowls, very, very loud, full of little rocks. That's a vibratory finishing bowl. And what they would do is take the assembled knife, and they put a bunch of them in that, and let them go around for a while, and it would knock off all the sharp corners and make the finishing operation go a lot quicker. But the problem is, this bone hard fiber material didn't do well with all the liquid that was in there. So they had to change, and that's when they went to the red micarta. And that's the same stuff that we use today, the red micarta. Now, it gets hard sometimes to tell them apart. Oftentimes, the color range on both of these materials can overlap. So sometimes, you're just looking at it going cross-eyed and you just can't tell, is that micarta or is that bone hard fiber? The only way to know for sure is to break it, and that doesn't go over too well when it's an old knife. People don't want you breaking their knives. So that's not a good way to tell. But anyways, that gets us to 69. If it's stamped Buck USA and it's got micarta, then it's between 69 and 72. If it's bone hard fiber, it's 67 to 69. There's other ways. I'm just going to touch on one real quick because it's fairly easy to see. The sheath. This is a particular sheath that was made for us it was Atchison leather, and we only used them was late 67 to early 69, so maybe about a year and a half. And their sheaths are very distinctive, and all the information is on the back. It's got this, I call it a dimple rivet in the middle of that D stitch. It's got the model number stamped on the belt loop, and the belt loop has the tooling lines down both sides. On the front, the snap won't have buck on it. So that was a sheath made for us by Atchison Leather, and we only use them for that short period of time. So finding out that information really helped when we were trying to date like Nemos, early Nemos or frontiersmen, because they were coming out about this time. So you're looking to see if they're in this older sheath, and that really helps nail down when that knife was made. And there again, nothing on this is like definite in concrete. It's that was up to 67, and then January of 68 we changed, because there's always inventory that needs to be used up and gets carried over, or on some models we may have started early because we ran out. So everything is pretty much about getting it. If I can get something within about a year, then I think we're doing pretty good on that. So now we're up to here. 72, of course, that's when we added the model number. And if you see how how the buck is oriented, it's holding the point down, it's right side up. The very first time we added the model numbers, we kept that same orientation. These are what we today refer to as inverted stamps. And from what we know, if you see one like this where the stamp is inverted or upside down, generally that was made in 72, maybe into 73, but most definitely 72 when we added the model number. And then within about a year, someone decided it would look better if that stamp was flipped around, like a modern stamp, you read it with the point facing up.
Now, wasn't that some of that because of the way they were displayed?
That may have had a lot to do with it too. I know that today, especially on the collectibles, if you look in the Buck catalog, you see the knife, you see where the stamp is at, then you buy one and the stamp is on the other side. They'll make one knife with the stamp the way they want it so that it orients on that page well. It's actually a pet peeve of mine and other collectors. They go, well, I want what it shows. Sometimes it's hard for the marketing people to understand. I said, well, it's just a blade stamp. But yeah, but it's not what it shows there.
I'm not into fixed blade, but aren't most of the fixed blades marked on the file side, on the reverse side?
Yeah, I always, with the knife pointing away, it's on the right-hand side.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with I know Larry Oden uses that term a lot too, the pile side, and I'm not familiar with that. Would that be the pile side?
If you hold the knife in front of you, point to the left, cutting edge down, you're looking at the file at the mark side.
Okay. Yeah, so it's on the mark side then.
Okay.
I'll have to remember that. It's like port and starboard.
Port starboard.
Yeah.
Well, you're a knife man, you got no knife terms.
Yeah. I kind of grew up, my knife knowledge, I grew up here, and I use the terms that I hear from these people, and they're not always industry standard terms. I find out, so sometimes I feel kind of silly out, I go to a knife show and I hear terms that, like, well, that's not the term we use. Like, we call this a blood groove, and I guess it's more commonly known as a fuller. So, but yeah, I'm learning.
How long have you been into knives? I mean, when did you start with Buck?
Well, I've been with Buck since '85, right when the Buckmaster was coming out, and it's still one of my favorite knives.
Me too.
So, but yeah, I didn't actually start collecting until maybe about 10 years ago, when they said, okay, you're going to be the guy that answers the phone, and answers the questions. And I said, well, where's my information? Where's the answers? And they said, have a nice day. So I just started, and that's what my office looks like it does. I just started accumulating old catalogs, magazines, the knives themselves, anything I could that would give some information. And now I've got, like 3-ring binders, this, actually more than that. There's a couple of them there, just full of information, because I always hated saying, I don't know, or that's the best I can do. And so it just meant I had to accumulate more and more stuff to be able to nail things down. So it's actually it's kind of fun. It's like an ongoing puzzle, with a bunch of pieces missing.
It's been wonderful for us to listen to you and I just think there's so much knowledge that this club has about Buck and everything else that I hope people are memorializing a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's invaluable. Like Charles Toft, his information. What I do when someone sends me information is I save that, because I'll take information from every source, and then his is so articulate, and I'm going to start with that and assume it's the Bible, and then start filling in any holes if there are any. But that's usually what I do when I did the 110s. My office floor was covered. There were hundreds and hundreds of 110s, mostly broken because I get them through warranty. And then there's catalogs with ads and documentation from in-house, like from the engineers, information from when it was the 110s from George Stencil. He's got a lot of information on 110s. So I've just got all of that, and then it's usually on my office floor for a minimum of a month. They don't come in and clean. I have to hang a sign on my door. This is, you won't make it to my desk. Here's the trash can. Just empty that. Don't vacuum, because you'll suck up rivets that are important. But yeah, it's I just take information from every source, and a lot of it comes from the collectors themselves, who pour a lot of time and effort into theirs. That's one of the biggest sources of information I get. So, but anyways, this is what I used to call the black hole, because every knife from 72 to 86 is stamped like that, and it really bugged me, because people would call, and when we get to that point, he was like, well, I'm sorry, that's a huge span of time, but there's no way to nail that down. Sure. Well, that wasn't acceptable to me. And so I started looking at the knives, and one of the benefits I have working in warranties, we get a lot of knives in that are not repairable, so they're scrap. We replace the knife with the customer, and I save all of those. And if I'm going to start a project, like when I started the project on, trying to fill in that black hole, what I started to do was accumulate all the broken black-handled knives that I could, the non-repairable ones. And, over the course of 6 months, I had several hundred of them. And so then the next step is to dump them all on my floor, and just start sorting them, going, well, you know what, this one's different, and this one's different the same, you know, and then start piling them up and grouping them based on any little thing I could see. And sometimes it'd be very frustrating because you'd find something, well, these are all different, but why is this one more different? And it's the only one that's more different. I'm like, well, okay, I'm putting it aside for now. But for the most part, you'll start to see a picture after you sort them all and resort them all, and then start bringing in any documentation that you know, any other information that you know, and start slotting it in. After a while, the muddy water starts to clear. And it did on those knives. And what it came down to was like, you know, you take a tree, you cut it in half, and you count the rings. It tells you how old it is. On those knives from 72 to 86, you're counting the micarta spacers that are in the handles and you know, on both ends of the handles. So this handout explains that. So if you look at, there's a group of knives from 73 to 1980 where the guard has 2 micarta spacers and the pommel has 2 micarta spacers. Well, after a while they started to think that, you know, like on this one here, you can hardly see that 1 micarta spacer there. You can't say that it's there for aesthetic purposes. I think it was just a carryover from the handmade knives where it actually served a purpose, you know, as somewhat of a shim. So after a while they started thinking, you know, we could save some money if we didn't put that there, and it's not serving a purpose. We'll just have to get the handle a tad longer, and there'll be one less piece to put in there, and the fewer parts you put on a knife, the fewer chances of, you know, maybe making a mistake, causing a defect. So it was all around a good idea. What they started with actually was removing this piece of the guard. So you see in 1981, the guard has 1 micarta spacer and the pommel still has the 2. So here's a guard with just the one spacer in it. They did that on that one also because, you know, like on this one here where the micarta extends past the handle on both ends, it got to be, you know, with heavy use, sometimes it would accumulate debris in there. You know, it starts to separate the micarta from the aluminum. So after a while, they decided, well, we're just going to get rid of that, because when the knives were coming back for rework, they saw that on a lot of them, so they decided that we'll just alleviate that problem and eliminate that piece of micarta. From 81 to 86, the guard has 1 micarta spacer and the pommel has 1. And that was actually this last knife I picked up. See, there's no extra piece between the handle and that aluminum spacer, and the same up here. And that's how we do those today. So, you know, those are some ways that you can kind of nail it down within that group and kind of get it in tighter blocks of time.
When was it 1 each?
1 each, that was 81 to 86.
Oh, you got 3.
Now,
Okay.
just this year, I was talking with Bill Keys, and he's our senior engineer, and we just got onto this subject, and he says, you know, I was involved in that project where we were eliminating micarta spacers, and I said, oh, great. And I don't like to ask them what they remember, because from what I've learned in doing all of this is that people's memories aren't always clear enough to be reliable. So I always tell people, you know, if I'm asking you for what you remember, I'm really, really desperate. So he says, well, this is what I remember. I said, well, that's really good, Bill. And he says, well, I still got my report too. And then I really perked up, and I said, you saved your report on that? I said, I need a copy. And then he started talking about other reports that he'd done, that, you know, other changes in other knives, and I ended up with a stack of his reports. So I haven't gone over that yet to see how it compares with what I've got typed up on the pass out. It may change that. I'm hoping that it'll narrow it down. One thing that I'm pretty sure is that the 119 and the 120 may have followed different paths than, say, a 105 or a 118 in relation to the number of spacers. I think maybe they kept that extra piece a little bit longer. So, but anyways, that's how you can narrow it down. We're learning new things just about every day. Another thing that's fairly recent is that I use the use and care. If you're lucky enough to find a knife in the box with the paperwork, you check the use and care leaflet, and it'll have a printer's code. And this one says 481100M. The 481 means April of 1981, and 100M, 100,000 of them were printed. That's what I'm assuming on that. But the thing that I used to think was that every single year we printed new use and cares. So if I find this knife and it says April 81, yay, this knife was made in 1981, and I can draw conclusions from that. I used to think that, and it drove me crazy when it didn't work. I have all these, especially the 110s, because I have a bunch of those with the box and paperwork. And the paperwork was telling me one thing, and the knives were telling me another, and so were the sheaths. You know, they might have a sheath from Atchison's. Like, I know when we made those, but this paperwork's wrong. Well, that's when I decided I need to research this paperwork, as silly as it sounds. And I found out that a perfect example is the use and care that we printed in January of '73. It was used in 73, 74, 75, part of 76. They used them till they're gone. Because mostly it was a generic how to care for your knife, how to get warranty service, things that didn't really change. So yeah, they used them.
If addresses or phone numbers didn't change, they usually, and we do, and we do the same thing today.
Yeah, there's no sense in changing it.
It's funny with your phone call. Once in a while, I'll get somebody will say, you know a little bit about buck knives. When was this made? And there'll be a date stamp on it. And I tell them it was made in 1989. Well, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, because I moved here in '90, and I know I bought that knife after '90. You asked me when it was made, not when you bought it.
Right.
Get that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Too funny.
Well, that was the thing where I teach my the clerks on the phone not to assume. I had one gentleman call, and he was older, so he said he had this knife, and so I perked up because I collect the old ones. And he says, yeah, it's green plastic, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I'm thinking, of course, that he's got a green lucite knife, and I'm thinking, God, do I have any money right now? Should I even go there? Try and talk him out of it, and I'm always very reluctant. I try to feel out the customer first. If the knife is, I can tell is really, really special, I don't even bring up that I would give my right arm for it, because it obviously means a lot to them. But in the case of him, he said, yeah, it's green plastic, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh. So I'm sure it's from the 40s, and oh my gosh. So I'm just listening and letting them talk, and I said, well, I started with my normal deal. Well, what's the blade say? So he said, well, let me find out. And I hear this, like, that's a folding knife opening up. Okay, you're raining on my parade, and it says Buck 422 USA. Okay, yeah, that's a Bucklight that we made in the 80s.
Olive drab green handles.
That's exactly what it was. So I use that example when I train them. Remember, don't assume, but just listen and ask questions. But yeah, basically that's in a nutshell, I guess. How I try to date knives, how I try to narrow them down within that timeline. Like I said, there's a lot of other little ways that you can come in and slice and dice it even more. You look at all the things that you have, the type of sheath, what's on the blade, like the paperwork, and nothing of it generally will nail it down, but you look for some sort of overlap.
I'm sure you get the phone calls the other way too. Well, this thing's got a black handle. Okay, it's got a black handle, and it just stamped Buck. All right, there's nothing else on the blade. No, there's not. But it does have a white stripe in the middle of the handle. You know, that's gone from okay to
Yeah,
the good
I'm
side.
listening now.
Yeah, the good side.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I'll get them where we know for sure how old it is. In fact, that green handled knife from that older gentleman, and he was insistent as to the age of the knife. And usually when it gets to that point, I just go, wow, well that's really a nice knife. And there's no sense in pushing it any further, but yeah, that's a nice knife. But anyways, yeah, if you have any more questions, even afterwards, you know where to find me, and I'll
Are
be
you going
glad to
to
help.
ever publish anything?
I hope to.
You don't wait till it's all done, wait till, get it out and, maybe somebody can help you out.
Yeah, my concern is that it's evolving so rapidly that as soon as I would put something out,
It just makes sure that you say, okay,
Number
this
two.
is where I am right now.
Mhm.
Here comes number 2.
revision
Levi's
27.
his guy.
That's true.